Hello, I'm Mike Fontanopoulos, academic coach for Springdale Public Schools, and I want to talk to you today about getting your points for evidence beyond the document. If you're writing an AP history DBQ, for example, like let's pretend you're writing an AP World History DBQ or any of the other two, U.S. history or European history, and you're trying to get your evidence beyond the document points. After watching today's video, hopefully you'll be able to have a better understanding of how to do that. If you have any questions, always seek out your teachers. And there's my information too, Mike Fontanopoulos, mfontanopoulos@sdl.org. Let's jump right in. So we're going to be using the AP World History DBQ from the 2020 national exam. I happen to be a reader for those guys and was able to lead some folks in that regard. And we read, oh gosh, over as a table, I think we read over 2,000 essays, if I'm not mistaken, something along those lines. And so we've got a little bit of an idea on what evidence beyond the doc looks like for that. So some thoughts that you might want to keep up with as you're doing evidence beyond the doc is evidence must be something beyond that found in the documents. And again, this is straight from the College Board. This is straight from the College Board website and their rubric. It must be something beyond that found in the docs. In other words, you can't say things that are already mentioned in the documents, and you can't double dip them either. You can't be writing in your contextualization paragraph and think, oh, I'll just say this same stuff later on in the essay and think you're going to get those points. You're not. It's going to get either context or evidence beyond the doc. So again, if you go back to my contextualization video, you'll see what I did there and how I just barely mentioned Japan. I just mentioned them in word. And then later on in the essay, I really ripped them apart in the form of exploring their history through the Meiji Restoration. And again, that just shows your reader that you had some foresight and that you actually planned your essay, etc. So that's just another, again, and it'll help you with your idea of complexity too. We'll talk about that in a minute. But first things first, let's go back and revisit the prompt. And so the prompt is, let's see here, evaluate the extent to which non-Western elites' approaches to modernizing their societies differed. And so if you remember, Doc 1 and Doc 2 and Doc 5 all had kind of like a positive approach. If I could put an emoji face on this, it would be that. And it was the Ottomans, and this was the Ottoman, and this was the Afghan. And then Doc 3, let's see, Doc 4, this was Chinese and this was Russian, and they did not want any part of it. They did not want to be like the West. They were rooted in their old cultures, if you will, and that's not what they wanted. So again, it's a great question to ask, and then you got to start thinking, you know, who here is not being represented? And so that's where we're going to go next. Let me get this erased. And so now I start to think about, how my essay is going to look. Paragraph 1 is always my thesis because I'm trained as a reader to look for the thesis either in the first paragraph or the last paragraph. And then paragraph 2 will be my contextualization. And I start that off by saying either in this last sentence up here or in the first sentence of my paragraph 2 to put the approach of non-Western elites and their response to modernization in context, and then somewhere in there, I might mention Japan, just the mentioning of the word Japan. And then paragraph 3, because I've got only 2 of them that are negative against it, that'll be the first one I lead into kind of as a lesser than, and then greater than would be those ones that are really for it. The 2 Ottoman docs, so this is 3 and that's 4, and this would be 1, 2, and 5. And then here's where I talk about Japan and really kind of exponentially expand upon it. And that's my evidence beyond the doc points, right? The evidence beyond the doc point here. And so now if I'm cruising through here and I'm writing good sentences that move me from this paragraph to that paragraph, I've mentioned Japan, and I come in here, I'll do a good transitional sentence in paragraph 2 to paragraph 3, and another transitional sentence here. You know, and then I set up and I really talk about Japan and how they did. I'm really getting into complexity as well. And so some kids think they have got to come up with something, uh, grand or some sort of unique thing. How about just good writing? Let's just do that. How about good writing? You allude to somebody that you're going to expand upon later, and then you do it, and then you kind of just kept with your thesis throughout the whole essay. And again, that's good writing, and I would do that. And again, through those good transition sentences, and again, answering the question. So there you go. Another thing that I would try to get away from is, and this is what hurts students, is again, if you're trying to close in and really figure out what your evidence beyond the doc is going to be, it shouldn't be that difficult if you've got the prompt in mind. Because once you start trying to associate evidence beyond the doc to the prompt, you're really going to limit yourself to just a few things. And understand this too, the College Board, and when they write these essays and when they get these essays out there, they're not about to sit there and, create a moment where your evidence beyond the doc is some micro moment. It's going to be something big. It's going to be a macro moment. And that macro moment, in this case, is the Japanese and their Meiji Restoration. And you can talk about other things, and you certainly could, but to me, it's that Meiji Restoration. And so you might want to come in. This is what some students might do, is they might come in and they might say something about how the Romanovs died, and Anastasia and all this kind of business. But then again, doesn't go back to the prompt, does it? Or then they might go in and start talking about how the Crimean War affected the Ottoman Empire. And but then they stop there, and they might do some Florence Nightingale stuff in the Crimean War, or how it's the first photographed war. None of that stuff's appropriate because it doesn't go back to the prompt. But if you were to say Crimean War helped to influence the Ottomans because they could see the power of Western artillery and things of this nature, now you're talking about another piece of evidence beyond the doc that would help. Again, those kids that are really good at history and telling you everything they know, sometimes they kind of freeze up here and they mess up because they don't go back to the prompt. Don't let that be you. Again, close in on what you're wanting to do with your evidence beyond the doc and make sure it's appropriate for the prompt, and you should be okay. Keep that in mind. Okay. So here is what I came up with, and you can see another non-Western elite. Again, these are all words from the prompt. I'm not coming up with something new, and neither should you. Non-Western elite who had, in this case, positive approach. So this must mean that I'm going to put this in paragraph 4, right? If this was a negative one, then I'd have put it in paragraph 3. Approach to modernization, not mentioned in the documents. Look at that little kind of a slick little moment there. I'm turning on a neon light to whoever's reading my essay that I'm going evidence beyond the doc. This is what I'm saying. I've got evidence beyond the doc. Here, take a look. And it was the king of Japan. He was known as the Meiji. He was reinstated as king by local and lesser shoguns so as to bring unity to the islands of Japan faster. Now, quite frankly, if I were to run out of ink right here and stop writing, you still get your evidence beyond the doc because you have described to a little bit of what it is. And so this is just me just continuing to chatter on about what I know about this. And this is something that maybe you knew. Maybe you remember Matthew Perry's visit. Maybe you remember how Japan was able to beat the Russians in the Russo-Japanese War. They didn't do that with flying stars and samurai swords. They did that through modern weaponry that they developed throughout the 1800s and the latter part of the 1800s in the Meiji Restoration, right? So again, there's your evidence beyond the doc. So again, you wouldn't have had to have really talked about any of this. If you could just get that first part down, that'd be fantastic. Or maybe you remember that part or that part. Again, don't leave the table, so to speak. Don't leave the table, think, well, I don't know the story wholly. Remember your words from the prompt, and then try to relate that to what you do know, and you'll be, I think you'll be happy, and you'll be better off by just leaving it blank. I can tell you that. So there you go. hopefully this will help you in your future as you write your essays for AP history classes. And if you have any questions, seek out your teacher. Remember my email at the front, and this is regarding your evidence beyond the doc points. All the best to you, and good luck.